All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to ETH Online, our Future Ethereum Summit. Very pleased to introduce the next speaker, Superphiz, who's a major part of the staking community that's growing around Ethereum 2. I was going to give a talk about intro to ETH2 and staking for beginners. So if you're interested in staking, you've heard about that, you don't know a lot about exactly what it means or what to do about it, this is the talk for you. Superphiz, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Josh. Hey there, I'm Superphiz, or Hank in the real world, and today I'm going to be providing an overview of Ethereum 2 and staking for beginners. My talk is directed at normal people who are just curious about Ethereum 2 and staking. As Superphiz, I help to organize the Ethtaker community, and you can find us at reddit.com/r/Ethtaker or in our Discord at invite.gg/Ethtaker. Our goal is to promote solo staking for the wider Ethereum community and to support all forms of staking, like pooled staking, staking as a service, and even custodial staking. We're average users who have a deep interest in Ethereum, and we think that one of the best ways we can contribute to the success of Ethereum is by staking Ether and earning a reward for doing that. And that's really what we do. We reach out to the community, we welcome people in, and we help them train to be ready to stake. Every talk needs a takeaway, and the takeaway from my talk ought to be that you're welcome in the Ethtaker community, whether that's on Reddit, on our Discord, Twitter, or wherever we turn up next. We actively welcome people of all ability levels, from any background, anywhere in the world. I'd like to give you a heads up that I am offering a POAP token to people who listen to this talk live. I'll give the instructions for claiming that POAP at the end of the talk. You have to wait. So the first question is, what is Ethereum 2? I believe some people think that Ethereum 2 is some kind of clone of Ethereum and that no one wants to hold a clone of Ethereum. They want the real thing. Ethereum 2 is Ethereum. Ethereum 1 plus Ethereum 2 make up the whole Ethereum ecosystem. Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 represent different layers of the Ethereum stack, and they're both the same platform. The transition from Ethereum 1 to Ethereum 2 will likely be completely transparent to end users. That is, you won't have to change your workflow, just experience the benefit from the changes. To make that really, really clear, the changes are under the hood, not in the user interface. There's no such thing as Eth1 Ether and Beacon Chain Ether. Beacon Chain Ether is Ether. For the rest of the talk, I'll refer to Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 chains, but remember that all Ether is Ether. So what are the changes that make Ethereum 2 so different from Ethereum 1? There are two changes that will help anyone have a better understanding of how Ethereum 2 is different and better than Ethereum 1. The first change is the switch from proof of work to proof of stake. When Ethereum launched in 2015, it was based on proof of work mining, which means you take either a processor or a graphics card, or later what's called an ASIC miner, and you solve a complex math problem over and over. When you're the first person to show a result that's sufficiently complex, you're rewarded 2 Ether, along with whatever transaction fees were collected in that block. Solving these complex problems seals blocks that contain transactions, and that block is added to the blockchain. That's essentially how the network is secured. The problem with proof of work is that it's very resource intensive. It's basically an arms race to have the most powerful miner, and these miners use a lot of electricity. And as technology improves, they quickly become obsolete and need to be replaced with more efficient miners. Ethereum 2 solves that problem with a system called proof of stake, which allows users to post a bond or a stake of 32 Ether that is a promise to the network that they'll behave honestly or face penalties against their stake. Your staked Ether allows you to perform the duties of a validator, like proposing blocks, attesting to the validity of new blocks, and identifying dishonest validators on the network. This stake is basically a credibility deposit that says, I'm telling the truth. So if you do a great job, you'll get a small reward, and if you're dishonest, you'll get a penalty. If you just decide to give up and go offline without exiting, you can lose up to half of your staked Ether and be ejected from the pool of validators. But you really shouldn't worry. In order to have a severe penalty, you would have to do something on purpose. We'll talk about an exception to that later, but don't worry. You're not going to accidentally lose your Ether. So The first big difference between Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 is the switch from proof of work to proof of stake. The second big change in Ethereum 2 is the creation of 64 Ethereum chains called shards. One of the reasons we need to improve Ethereum is that the network has become very popular and it's basically out of space. To address that problem, we're creating 64 Ethereum chains and linking them together. By doing that, we have substantial capacity growth. When these chains are deployed, probably sometime after 2021, they'll be linked together by a special chain called the beacon chain that coordinates progress of the 64 shards. This beacon chain is really what we're talking about today. It's the backbone for the improved Ethereum network. These two features, the switch to proof of stake and the switch to sharding, are massive improvements from Ethereum 1 to Ethereum 2. So that's the big change. The next question is, I want to be a staker, but 32 Ether is a lot of money. It's more than I can afford. Well, the reason you have to put up a bond of 32 Ether is that you're accepting a lot of responsibility. And the only way the network can guarantee that you're taking that responsibility seriously is to have something to hold over your head to say, if you want to earn money, you have to do the job correctly. If you don't do the job correctly, we're going to take some of your money away. It turns out this incentive really encourages people to do the right thing. A lot of thought was given to the correct number of Ether for a stake. If the bond is too low, there could be millions of validators on the Ethereum 2 network causing congestion that would make it difficult for the network to communicate. But with a bond that's too high, it becomes prohibitive for solo stakers to participate. Right now, as the beacon chain is preparing to launch, one validator, or 32 Ether, costs about $10,000. On one hand, that's a lot of money for anyone. On the other hand, it's still reasonable for someone who is deeply committed to participating in Ethereum 2. With a stake of 32 Ether, the network can support every Ether being staked and still run stably and securely. So let's say you don't have 32 Ether. That's okay. I feel like you shouldn't even consider staking unless you can stake happily with half of your Ether. If you have 32 Ether, as your friend, I'm going to encourage you to just hold it. Don't stake with it. Just hold those 32 Ether. If you have 64 Ether, you might be in a good position to run one stake with 32 Ether. If you don't have 32 Ether, it's a good idea to just wait. Wait until the network has been through a trial by fire and just continue to accumulate or do whatever is right for your financial situation. Right now, staking on Ethereum is in its infancy. For the last several months, we've been running testnets and client implementers have been preparing to onboard stakers onto the network, and things look great. But for the first 5 months of phase 0, the bugs and kinks will be getting worked out, and your staking node will likely require a lot of attention. If you don't have the time or the commitment to monitor your staking client every day, it's best if you stake on a testnet and wait until the main network is stable. A checkpoint is planned for 5 months after the beacon chain launch, and this would be a great time for someone who is interested in running a validator without having to monitor it daily. If you don't have 32 Ether, or if you don't have enough Ether that it's a good idea for you to stake, there will be alternatives available in the future. I don't personally endorse any of these alternatives, and that's because as a community, Ethtaker believes that solo staking is the most secure way to stake. But a few months after launch, you're going to see things like staking pools, where you can hold less than 32 Ether and pool with other people to stake and get a share of the reward. That looks really appealing, and I think it's a good idea. I'm actually going to try it myself a little bit, but it comes with the added risk of dealing with third parties who may be using vulnerable contracts or centralized servers, or maybe they're giving you a reward as a token that's something other than Ether. In the worst case scenario, someone could take your Ether and convince you that they're staking it on your behalf, but they've taken it and disappeared. If they're really crafty, you may not even know this has actually happened until transactions are enabled over a year later. These trade-offs mean that you could end up losing value that you wouldn't have lost if you either did solo staking or if you just held your Ether without staking. I don't want to tell anyone not to use staking pools or other services, but I do want to tell you that you should be very careful when you get involved with these services. In the longer term, we're going to see exchanges who will be involved with staking Ether. You'll be able to make deposits and earn a small return off of those. That comes with a trade-off. You're going to earn a small return from depositing your Ether with them, and they're going to stake it. From a decentralization perspective, this is a concern for the network. We don't know how those exchanges are staking. We don't know what systems they're using, and they may be centralizing large numbers of validators. It's actually okay, because if they mishandle your stake and lose it, the network will recover. The consequence will be that you as an individual could lose your stake even with these trusted exchanges. I would say it's better to solo stake than to trust them with your funds. So let's say that you're interested in staking, but you're not really sure if it's right for you. I would absolutely encourage anyone who's interested in staking to spend at least a month staking on a testnet so that you can see what it's like to keep up an e-staking server, and so you can see what the reward system looks like, even though those rewards won't be realistic on the testnet. To begin the process of staking on the beacon chain of Ethereum 2, you're going to send 32 Ether to a contract on the Ethereum 1 network. In exchange for sending 32 Ether, you're going to get a digital receipt that you'll claim using a validator client that tells the beacon chain network, "Hi, I'm a validator and I'm ready to do work as soon as I'm inducted on the beacon chain." From that point, you'll wait anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks to be inducted as a validator, depending on the length of the validator queue. As soon as you're inducted as a validator, your staking client will begin doing the job of validating for you. Every 6 minutes, you'll get a payout. You'll get a small reward for doing your job. If you go offline, you'll lose about as much as you would have gained if you had been online. You do not have to have perfect uptime to be an Ethereum staker, but the better your uptime, the higher your potential profit will be. Real rewards will be measured in several decimal places of Ether every 6 minutes, and you can see these in real time on your validator client logs. You're probably wondering what rewards look like on Ethereum 2. Will it be worth the effort? I have to tell you that the purpose of Ethereum 2 is not to make validators rich. The rewards on Ethereum 2 are designed to be the minimum reward that will encourage people to continue running validator clients. This reward is variable based on the number of Ether that are deposited. For example, if 1 million Ether are deposited, the annual rate of reward will be 18%. And so what's going to happen then is that people are going to say, "Oh, wow, it's really valuable to stake on Ethereum." So they'll add deposits, and it's going to push the deposits up to 3 million. Then, because it's a sliding scale, the rewards will be 10%, and people will continue to be excited and send deposits in. The magic happens when there are between 10 million and 30 million Ether staked, and the rewards will be between 3 and 5%. People will seriously question whether it's worth having their Ether locked up in phase 0 when they're only earning 3% interest. The good news is that when transactions are enabled, people will be able to add or remove staking deposits more easily, and the value of staking will easily find its own equilibrium. If you're staking in phase 0, you're not going to get that deposit back until after Ethereum 1 is integrated as a shard onto Ethereum 2, and that's probably going to be more than a year down the road. This isn't a deterrent to staking in phase 0, but it's a caution that you should carefully consider how you will fare with your Ether locked up in the network for an unspecified period of time, most commonly cited as about 2 years. So you've heard enough. You know that Ethereum 2 is a major upgrade to the Ethereum 1 network. You know that the validator deposits are 32 Ether, and you know that if you send a deposit to become a validator during the first phase of Ethereum 2, those funds will be locked up for around 2 years. And you're still committed to doing it. What's next? Let's talk about hardware. There are a wide range of hardware configurations that will work, and there are also some best practices for choosing hardware. I'm going to describe a few common hardware scenarios for home stakers. The most common scenario is to run an Ethereum staking node on some kind of desktop computer at home. Regardless of whether you build it yourself or buy a pre-built desktop, you want a processor that has a passmark score above 6,000 on CPUbenchmark.net. These processors are powerful enough to continue seeking the beacon chain when the network is under stress, and they'll continue to support the network in later phases. You'll want a minimum of 16 gigs of RAM, though I like 32 gigs of RAM, especially if you plan to run any kind of node monitoring software on this system. And you'll need at least 1 terabyte of SSD storage. It's important that you use some form of SSD storage and not an old rotational or platter drive for staking, Rotational drives are only useful for long-term storage now, and they just can't keep up with the data requirements of staking. In 2020 prices, you can buy this kind of desktop setup for about $600. But remember that in the computer hardware market, you pretty much get what you pay for. So how about Intel NUCs or mini PCs? I like these, and they're a fun little thing that you can put in an out-of-the-way space to do the job. You can buy them pre-configured so that you know the hardware is compatible. I think this is a good option. Just make sure you buy a device that is powerful enough to handle the load, and you should be set to go. To be honest, for the money, value, and space requirements, I would seriously consider staking on an 8th generation or higher Intel NUC that was outfitted with 16 or 32 gigs of RAM and a 1 or 2 terabyte SSD drive. That brings me to laptops. There's nothing inherently wrong with staking on a laptop, and I'm sure lots of people will be just fine doing it. But if you're buying a machine just for staking, I probably wouldn't choose a laptop. You're paying a premium price for a screen you don't need and a small form factor that reduces heat dissipation. On top of that, laptops simply aren't designed to run 24/7. A lot of people are fascinated by trying to stake with Raspberry Pis, and I'm going to suggest that that's just not a great idea. On a perfectly running network in phase 0, the first phase of Ethereum 2, a Raspberry Pi 4 will do fine. But if anything goes wrong with the network, if there's any difficulty with finalization, or if there's any reason for the network to be congested with traffic, a Raspberry Pi will quickly become overwhelmed and not be able to do the job of a validator. For comparison, the Raspberry Pi 4 has an estimated passmark score around 900, and I'm suggesting a CPU that has a passmark score above 6,000. One other option to consider is staking on used server hardware. You can buy used servers online for a pretty fair price, and they have a lot of redundancy built in, which increases your odds of being online continuously, and they were designed to run 24/7 forever. That makes them a great choice for staking, and you can get everything you need for less than $1,000. This is in fact the route I chose when I began getting involved with staking, but it's one that I'd rethink now because I have a large noisy machine to keep somewhere in my home. I also suggest that you run hardware locally. If you choose to run a cloud service provider, things are going to work really well. You can probably expect to spend about $20 or $30 a month for that cloud server. The risk is that it's a loss of decentralization. There are likely to be a lot of people running their Ethereum 2 nodes in cloud services, and I know they have fantastic uptime. But if by some chance those cloud services go offline, your node will be offline and it will be out of your control. If a large portion of the network goes offline at one time, like AWS goes down and 35% of Ethereum 2 nodes are on AWS, the network will go into an inactivity leak, which means that all offline validators will lose Ether until finality is reached again. And online validators will maintain a constant balance if they do the validating job perfectly. Finality is reached again when more than 66% of the validators are back online and validating. While one strong incentive is for stakers to remain online, it's even more important for them to remain online when many others are offline. By this time, you've thought about your hardware and you're ready to start building a stable software stack. A survey of the Ethereum community conducted by my friend Nolan found that 75% of stakers plan to run Linux, 15% plan to run Windows, and 10% are virtualizing or running OS X. My strong preference is to stake using Ubuntu Linux 20.04, the long-term support version of Ubuntu. I've had great success with it, and I feel like that platform is more or less accepted as a community standard. 75% of stakers will run a local server, while 25% will stake on a cloud-based service. Beyond that, you're going to need data from an Ethereum 1 client like Geth and an Ethereum 2 client. These are the pieces of software that have been in development for the past 2 years, and you're most likely to recognize the names Prism, Lighthouse, Teku, and Nimbus. But first, let's talk about the need for Ethereum 1 data. Data from the Ethereum 1 chain is required for running a proof-of-stake validator. The beacon chain needs to know about deposits that are submitted for inclusion into the proof-of-stake network, and the only reliable way to get this is from the Ethereum 1 chain. The first way to do this is to connect to a service like Infura. These are services that provide a data feed about the Ethereum 1 chain so that rather than running your own service, you can connect to them and get the data you need. I don't recommend using a feed because if it goes down, it will stop your entire staking operation and you won't be able to do anything about it. If that provider goes down and you decide that you want to switch to hosting your own node, it will take you several days to sync the chain, and all of that time, you'll be slowly leaking Ether from your stake. My suggestion is to run an Ethereum 1 service like Geth. Some people feel that this is an overkill because you'll probably need 500 gigs of space for Geth in the long term and 48 gigs of memory just to keep Geth running happily. But the benefit is that it contributes to the decentralization of the network, and it means that if those service providers go down, you'll still be validating. One of the key concepts of Ethereum 2 staking is to be robust and resilient against single points of failure, like relying on third-party services. One of the things that I encourage people to do when it comes to staking is not to look like anyone else. If everyone runs the same setup, any flaw in that setup is going to ripple through the network and affect everyone, potentially leading to inactivity leaks where greater than 1/3 of the nodes are offline. You don't want to be in that group of people that goes offline, and the way to prevent that is to keep your system updated and secure and to make sure your internet connection is stable. So let's say you're using a local ISP. That could be great. You might go offline once a month for an hour, but it's much better to go offline once a month for an hour than to be offline at the same time that many of the validators on the network are offline. If half of the validators go offline, inactivity leakage will kick in. But if you're the only one offline, it'll be a tiny penalty. The next big factor is choosing a client. There are 4 clients that will likely be launch ready based on what we know right now, and those are Lighthouse, Prism, Teku, and Nimbus. Each of these validator clients are written in different programming languages, and they've all passed tests that show that they know how to interact correctly with the Ethereum 2 protocol. Ethereum 2 network communications really are a protocol now because there's a standard way of communicating between different clients. One of the strengths of Ethereum 2 design is this protocol style development, where different clients learn to speak the same language to reduce the chances of miscommunication. If there were only one client, it could communicate any way it liked. There wouldn't be any need for protocol style communication or standardization. It would also be weaker and open to network attacks. When you choose one of these clients, the thing you want to do is choose one that's not used by everyone else. I encourage people to use the second or third most popular client because choosing the most popular client brings the biggest risk of inactivity leaking if something goes wrong with that client. The validators using that client will leak below 16 Ether, and those validators will be pushed off the network unless they can get a software fix or they can switch to a different validator client. And that really does work. After you've selected your client setup and you're set up your system the way you want, it's time to head over to the Ethereum 2 Launchpad. For mainnet, you'll find this at launchpad.ethereum.org. And for testnets, you'll put the testnet name in front of that address, like medasha.launchpad.ethereum.org. The best advice I can give to anyone is to spend a full month staking on the testnet before even considering staking 32 Ether on the mainnet. So it really makes sense to start at medasha.launchpad.ethereum.org. When you get there, you'll go through a bunch of really valuable information. It's worth your time to spend plenty of time checking out every bit of information there. After you complete the information portion, you'll have the opportunity to tell the Launchpad how many validators you want to run. And you'll download a deposit script that will help you generate a 24-word seed phrase and corresponding keys for all of your validators. Next, you'll use MetaMask to upload a list of your validator keys and submit 32 Ether deposits to the Ethereum 1 network. While I find it to be a pretty easy system, I would really push everyone to play with it for a long time on testnet using girly Ether until they're completely comfortable with the flow of events before sending real Ether. And that's it. From that point, you'll import your validator keys into your client and make sure everything is synced up. Then it's just a matter of waiting until your validator is inducted. The easiest way to check the status of your validator is to enter the Ethereum 1 address that you sent the deposit from into the search field at Beacon Chain, beacon.cha.in, and it will tell you the public keys for any validators that you submitted deposits for. As I wrap things up, there are a few things I'd like to share with everyone about best practice. The first best practice is don't host your validator in 2 places. This means don't run your validator on 2 computers at your house, or at 1 computer at your house and 1 on the cloud at the same time. Because running those 2 validators at the same time will cause you to send conflicting data to the network, and it will produce a slashable offense. Basically, what this means is that your validator has a chance to be randomly selected to provide an attestation every 12 seconds. If you somehow manage to have 2 machines with the same validator keys, it's inevitable that they will submit different data at some point, and this is considered a malicious offense by the network. The easy way to prevent this is to only run 1 staking node. Only keep your keys on 1 computer. The second thing I want everyone to remember is that you should not stake too much. As excited as I am about Ethereum 2, I also recognize that there's risk involved. There are risks that may not be obvious at first. One of those risks is that the price of Ether could go very high while your Ether is locked up for a long time, and you can't sell them because they're locked up. If you think there's any chance that you're going to need the Ether that you're staking, don't stake them. Just hold on to them. The third thing is your seed phrase. When you go through the launchpad process as a staker, you're going to get a 24-word seed phrase. That seed phrase will be used in the future to generate your withdrawal key. If you lose those 24 words, you won't be able to withdraw your funds. You'll be able to continue validating with your validator keys, but you'll never be able to withdraw the funds, and they will simply be lost to the network. Don't lose your 24-word seed phrase. Finally, be careful where you send your Ether. As Ethereum 2 emerges, there will be a lot of exciting places to send your Ether to gain rewards. There will be services and exchanges promising to stake for you. There will be people bragging about how good they are at running a staking node, and there will be people who post fake addresses for you to send Ether to for staking. You have to be extremely vigilant with your Ether and keep in mind that this transition is a prime opportunity for dishonest people to pick up some low-hanging fruit. It's been really great sharing Ethereum 2 with you. I know it's going to be really exciting, and I can tell you that the Ethtaker community has done a lot of preparation to help everyone feel comfortable getting involved with staking. You can find us at reddit.com/r/Ethtaker or on our Discord, insta.gg/Ethtaker. We also have a couple of programs that you might be interested in. One of them is called the Ethereum Study Master. It's a program where you can read articles every week for 10 weeks and take a quiz on those articles. After 10 weeks, you can earn a proof of attendance protocol, a POAP token, for demonstrating your knowledge of Ethereum 2. Now, that's just a neat way to show that you've invested time and are knowledgeable about Ethereum. It kind of gives you a little incentive to learn more about how things work. You can learn more about the Study Master program at ethereumstudymaster.com. Ethtaker has also developed a really cool collaboration style program where you can signal your interest by completing a form, then get added to a small group with 4 other people who you can develop a long-term staking relationship with in a private Discord chat. It's just a way to connect with a small group of people in the community rather than being overwhelmed with so many people at one time. In addition to that, we have a great group of Ethtaker educators on our Discord channel. Those are a group of about 10 people who are ready to help you anytime you come into our general room on the Ethtaker Discord and ask a question. So we want you to feel comfortable. We know that staking isn't right for everyone. I'll be the first to admit that you should think long and hard before you commit to staking. But if and when you decide to do that, or if you even have questions about it, we definitely want to be here to support you, and we will always do our best to lead you in the right direction. Thanks for your time, and good luck with staking. I'd like to thank Michael Geeson from Unvetica for providing support for this presentation. For 30 minutes after this live call, if you check out unvetica.com/ethonline, you can claim a POAP token, that's a proof of participation token, by entering the secret word Ethtaker in lowercase. You can also find all of the resources from this talk on that site. Thank you very much, and take care.
Wow, thanks, Hank. That was a great talk. We do have one question from the chat, if you just have a minute to get into it. So Alex Wyckoff asks, I'd love to hear your suggestions on routers. Off-the-shelf brands tend to bog down with a lot of sustained peering connections. Are y'all using Unified Dream Machines or something else?
So I love that you said the Unified Dream Machine. The Ubiquity line is is a favorite among our community. And so it's not that I want to promote them, but I'm using a Ubiquiti ER4 right now and it's working well. The Dream Machine line is very popular. So yeah, the upper tier of consumer hardware that the Ubiquiti line provides is probably what we're looking at.
Okay. And we've actually got one more quick question.
Great.
Can you stake using offline keys?
I don't know the current status of that, and I think that it would be better to get an answer for that offline. I don't want to shoot in the dark and aim wrong.
Great. Well, the viewer who asked that question, I mean, Superphiz, if you want to jump into our chat after you're done here, feel free to jump in and answer some questions. And of course, there's the Ethtaker Discord, the links of which you shared earlier that someone can definitely find this answer to. All right. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Superphiz. Thank you, Michael. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.